But one of the most profound things was that when I was fired from that gig, I mean, the director at the time was like, I promise you'll never ever work ever again.
Is that what he said?
Yes. And I think I slumped into a bit of a depression.
Sure.
For some time.
I mean, who wouldn't?
Yeah.
Come on.
I think for about a year or two. And it's funny enough that through that, where I thought maybe my career would be defined as probably being a session musician, then I had to redefine myself in that now I had to focus more on my own creative output, in actually writing my own music, setting up my own shows.
702.
The upside of failure.
Sometimes failure is the foundation of greatest success stories.
Mandla, I've been wanting to speak to you for a long time.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, they call you in the script over here young trumpeter. Are you a young trumpeter?
I'm definitely a bit older than I was last year, but I'm still younger than I should be. I think I like that name.
Okay.
That label.
Description.
Yeah.
All right. Young trumpeter Mandla Mlangeni is redefining the art of jazz by reflecting the hopeful past and the beauty of South Africa born through his trumpet. Born in 1986 in Soweto. Now, this 1986, and I mean, I matriculated, I'll tell you, but nobody else. I matriculated in 1989. And that was a very difficult time in our country's history. It really was. But you were born then son of politician and lawyer, and I will mention your dad, Relebogile Mabotja. You're now set to present the Oratorio of a Forgotten Youth at the Market Theatre in Newtown on Saturday and on Sunday. That's the introduction I want to give you. How else would you describe yourself, though?
Fun, outgoing guy who like to just, it's soak it all in, especially when it comes to music and culture.
Soak it all in.
Yes.
I love your outlook to life. I think it's absolutely fantastic. All right. Now, talking about where you came from, and you've got a lot of history that comes with you. And I'm going to talk about your dad as well. Your dad, who was killed by the apartheid police. That was back, I think, 1991 when that happened. From that was, you very often, you look at somebody who you call a creative. From that comes a lot of pain, a lot of heartache from that. But then out of that comes music. Am I right?
Yes, that was a long process after that. But my father was actually very politically active. Not only was he a political activist, he was a lawyer, investigating the atrocities of the Third Force, as we know it today, and exposed the Vlak Plus through the Harms Commission. And he was representing the Dalmas 4, and through representing the Dalmas 4, that's how they found out about the Vlak Plus operations. And then Coetzee.
Dirk Coetzee, yeah.
And a booby trap, a parcel bomb that was sent to Dirk Coetzee and was then sent back to my father by Eugene de Kock. And this happened when I was probably 4.5. And it was a very traumatic time.
Do you remember your dad at all? Do you have any memory?
Yes.
4.5. Do you?
Fond memories of him.
Okay.
I remember one of the earliest memories was when he took me to one of the... when they were releasing Walter Sisulu and the Dalmas and the Dalmas with Mom Albertina Sisulu. This was back in 1990. I think one of my earliest memories. Yeah, and also my birthday, my earliest birthday. I was 3 years old, and I was surrounded by a family, and I just remember that time in our lounge. And I think that's one of the saddest things, is that I was deprived time to be with my father and to spend those precious moments with him.
Yeah. All right. Tell me about the trumpets. Tell me about the birth of your musical career, because I can see you full of music.
Yes.
You came bounding in here today, and I just smiled.
Yeah. Actually, trumpet was never my first choice.
Yeah.
I started playing my journey into music was through song, either through church, or I had some relatives who were izangoma. But mainly through church, I learned how to sing. I was singing at the church hymns, and also went to a Catholic school.
Where was that?
Mayfair Convent.
Okay.
And every Friday, as you know, was always Mass. Yes. Or every first Friday of the month was always Mass.
That's right.
So it would always be part of the choir, part of either an altar server. And then when I think I was in grade 4. No, grade 6, standard 4.
I also get confused. Grade 6, I can't get it. Yeah.
So I was in grade 6. I started picking up the recorder, And that's when I learned how to read and actually taught myself how to transcribe music on the radio. And then the journey to trumpet was when I attended a music school in the community called Welcome Soweto School of Music.
Okay.
And I wanted to pick up actually saxophone because it always looked so appealing and sexy. And I'd watch TV and I'd see the Kenny G's play. And it was like, I thought that was one way of like, getting girls. And then my teacher said, no, none of these instruments are available. And I thought to myself, how can I actually play the trumpet? Because it's just 3 buttons. And how can I make music with that? And lo and behold, I took to it. And through that, I actually was able to audition to for the National School of the Arts. I attended there.
Okay.
And then I also was able to then further my studies at the University of Cape Town.
Right. What happened after that? Because there were things that came along. Now, I'm building you up for a reason, because it is called the upside of failure, but the upside is the whole thing about it. Now, what happened after that?
Well, after studying in Cape Town, actually, mind you, I spent a couple of years teaching in and around Cape Town, particularly in Stellenbosch. I was teaching not Stellenbosch, Franschhoek.
Franschhoek.
And I wasn't driving.
Yeah.
I wasn't driving, so I had to travel by taxi. And that was always a mission, because at that time, I think this was back in 2010, they were still building the road in Drakenstein. The Drakenstein Road.
That's right.
And the traffic jams were like really, really crazy. It would take about 30 minutes just for you. It was always one-way traffic, and the trucks would always go by. So I was always late there. And plus, I think if you were also working in a farm, the distance from the gate to actually the first room where you're actually supposed to teach is about 1 kilometer. So I was properly told for that job. And I was coming in the class and I was panting. And then I think I also had to also speak Afrikaans as well. So one of my few encounters in actually learning how to actually teach operate in Afrikaans and teach these young kids, because many of them didn't speak English.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did that work out? Afrikaans, it's an interesting language, but it takes a while to learn.
Yeah, I studied Afrikaans, in high school.
Like we did all in school.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then, but also I was living in Cape Town, so I was also playing and around. So, but there was like, they put me in the deep end. Ek get met die kinders probeer om Afrikaans te praat, maar no, ek gaan nie onthou nie.
Don't worry, I'm actually married to an Afrikaans woman, and when she gets really cross with me, she opens fire in Afrikaans, and I basically stand there with a dictionary going like, hold on a second, what was that word? Don't feel bad. And then after that as well, it's got bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yes, so and then through that, actually, I left that gig, and then I started touring with the Cape Town Opera, and that's where we toured in and around not only South Africa. We actually performed in Edinburgh for that big Edinburgh Festival.
Yeah.
And then we did the South Bank, we did the Albert Hall, we did World Millennium Centre. That's where we met Sir Gordon. And then, so it was quite eventful. And then I won. No, I didn't win, actually. I was runner-up for the SAMRO International Overseas Scholarship back in 2012. And it was the same time that I was actually contracted to actually work on this big gig that was going to tour internationally. It was a very, very big gig. It went on to Singapore. And I thought I was ready for that gig, but landed up in Singapore.
Yeah.
And when I landed up in Singapore, the gig was quite gruesome. You essentially had one day off, and you started performing from Tuesday up until Sunday, and then with 2 matinee shows on Saturday and Sunday. So yes, we did that for 3 months, and it was the death of me. And that's how I lost that gig. I actually got fired.
Okay.
So I couldn't cope with that.
You were right up there. And let's get into this.
Yes.
Let's get to the downside now. Now we're bringing you down. Why couldn't you cope? Was it just too much too soon?
I think the stress of it, and plus also what was involved. I think it involved a lot of choreography, and also it being a Broadway musical. It needed, I think, it's not like playing on stage where it can be free and you can improvise around that. Everything needs to almost be precise. So the anxiety of that, everything being perfect, almost gets to you. In that, let's say, if you think too much about making a wrong step, and you actually do make a wrong step, it messes everything up. And obviously, when you're playing trumpet, there are days when your lips are very tired from the excessive pressure of actually playing for about 4 hours at a given time. And and then also plus my dependency on alcohol.
Okay.
at time, and I think I need to also speak to that and how I used that as a crutch was also part of that pitfall, and I didn't actually realize it at that time, and always blaming others for my mistakes. And the strange thing also is that also those environments,
Yeah.
in many ways, kind of racialized, and how the cast and the crew are always split.
That's difficult.
And the crew.
Always split.
Yeah, I mean, in a sense, because I was part of the creatives in terms of performing, the performance crew, and was mostly white. It was a mostly white cast. And then the crew would be predominantly black. The people would be doing the sound, the people were doing the lighting. And, I mean, different senses, and also how the outlooks on life. And it's always trying to fit in.
Difficult.
And then you're in a country such as Singapore, where there's also not so much to do as well. It's a finance.
So you can't release. You can't get that little bit of downtime.
Yes.
To say that pressure valve that just goes off a little bit.
Yes. And the only times that I could release was when I was attending jam sessions, and that's why I met many of my friends now.
Right.
But yeah, that was a very, very tough time, considering that I also lost a brother at that time. Yeah, so it was very, very sad, and I couldn't go and bury him. So that was a bit stressful, and it weighed heavily on me. And I think, but one of the most profound things was that when I was fired from that gig, I mean, the director at the time was like, I promise you'll never ever work ever again.
Is that what he said?
Yes. You'll never find work. Essentially, I was blackballed. And and I think I slumped into a bit of a depression.
Sure.
For some time.
I mean, who wouldn't? Come on, that's a big blow to have. And then I think for about a year or two, kind of slowly picked myself up. And it's funny enough that through that, where I thought maybe my career would be defined as probably being a session musician, playing international shows, then I had to redefine myself in that now I had to focus more on my own creative output, in actually writing my own music, setting up my own shows, establishing my own relationships with the venues or club owners and academic institutions, and actually finding an outlet. Isn't that a better way to go? Because if you're going to be in Singapore with these top-class musicians in their eyes, and there's that massive pressure, but if you're going to be doing your own thing with the friends that you have now found, all of a sudden it's your show, and you just have one way to go, and that's up.
Yes, but I mean, that takes a long time before you gain that recognition. It probably takes about 5-6 years, and sometimes you don't even get that recognition.
Sure.
And we finished that gig in Singapore, and then I came back to Cape Town, and that's where I actually started working more with artists, fine artists, crafting those shows, putting on my own shows, and meeting other musicians, more established musicians. I got introduced to the great Louis Moholu.
Okay.
I was part of like the first batch of exiles in South Africa that went to the UK and created their own form of jazz there. And I started working with him, and that was in many ways also a breakthrough, and that he gave me the space to also write my music, share my music with the band. But it was still an uphill road,
Yeah. Fascinating. We're chatting to Mandla Mlangeni. Now, if you don't know him, he plays the trumpet. He's a musician as well, and we've enjoyed chatting to him and going through his journey. Mandla, does it come down to confidence as well? Is it a confidence game? Because people can knock you down, but perhaps only after you've had a performance, you think, that note was off, I was wrong there. Or perhaps you get home and you just raise a glass and go, you know what, hey, that was goody.
Yeah, I think sometimes that my attachment to music is that it needs to make people feel good. And the best thing about what I do is that it's not like brain surgery, or I'm not a doctor in that sense, and that if I make a mistake and somebody dies, at least I won't be sued for malpractice. But then at the same time, it still has the same benefits of being a doctor, in that I also provide some kind of healing or some kind of enjoyment, and the audience members can come back to me and say, I was deeply touched by what you played. And I feel that's my power, and that's my purpose, that I can bring a sense of relief and enjoyment in what I do. And I don't take myself too seriously.
I was about to say,
I try not to do that.
Hard on yourself as well. Because, like you said, it's music. And on a Friday night, people are sitting there, they've had one or too many whiskeys, and all of a sudden, you just start playing that trumpet. And I can promise you can do nothing wrong.
Yeah, most of the time. If they've had too many whiskeys, then it becomes a bit of a challenge. some of them become too rowdy, and we don't want the rowdiness, too much rowdiness.
Well, it's jazz. It should be
No.
jazz anyway.
No ways, But I mean, there's different kinds of environments. It's just like when you go to church, you can't just all rant on, right?
No,
So
sure.
there's a ritual in how it all starts. There's a processional. There's the hymnals and everything, and that's how it. And music is almost like that. It's ritualistic, where the audience also participates, and so does the musician. But that amount of space needs to be given to both parties. Just when there's also a time to clap and there's a time to holler and all those things.
Sure.
And also different settings. It's just not like you can go to a braai dressed in a suit. Or you go to a beach, you can go to a wedding in flippers, in
Exactly,
flip-flops, So it's like that. So it's different occasions, and different occasions call for different kinds of approaches.
But you're doing well. You're going to be in the Oratoria of a Forgotten Youth at the Market Theatre in Newtown. Tell us about that.
Oh no, it's actually at the Wits Great Hall.
Oh
yes. So it's quite symbolic for me because that's where my father graduated in 1986, and that's where they usually hold the graduation ceremonies at the Wits Great Hall.
Yeah.
And it was around this time, usually in May, April, where they usually have the ceremonies, and it's happening on the 27th of May.
Okay.
At the Wits Great Hall, and I'll be collaborating with the Brother Moves On, together with a 4-piece string quartet by the name of the Resonance Strings, together with a choir. The Vivacious Sounds, and poet and theatre practitioner Lesogora Mpulukeng. And tickets are going for 150, and they can be found online.
Good.
Yes.
Exactly. If anybody has any questions, they can contact me at rayw@702.co.za, and I'll throw them your way. No problem. Now, what about your own music? I mean, you got to the point, Chad, and I keep hinting at this and saying, that's what happened then. Fair enough. We all have learning curves. I mean, I remember the first time I read a news bulletin. I was horrendous. Someone took me to one side and said, hey, listen, Sonny, that's not going to happen for you. And things got better. So now, what about yourself, your own albums, your own musical career?
And that's what I've learned. The more you actually make your music and the more you release your music, the better you become at doing it. And you might find the first album has its, people like it, but you always hear that one thing that you actually don't like about it. And that's what I appreciate most about actually pursuing your own goals and your own creative endeavors.
Who's your inspiration?
I've got so many.
Oh, do tell.
One of my biggest inspirations actually by the name of Winton Masolis, who actually runs the Jazz at Lincoln Center and is a phenomenal trumpeter, comes from a musical family, and is a prolific composer, and who's still alive. And then back here in South Africa, I've also got we've got our very own Mokoim Khobata, who's actually in the other room, and he's quite one of the most entrepreneurial musicians and people that you can find, in that he's always doing his own thing and is always pushing for his own sound, and that's what I value the most, and trying to create your own space, and that's what I try to do with my music and my creative endeavors.
Yeah, which is quite something. And now, being in front of a crowd, is that daunting, or have you got to the point now where you've thought, I don't care if I've just filled the FNB or whether I'm at Ray's pub, it's fine?
I love that. I love the crowd. I love whenever I'm on stage, whether it's 2 people, 5 people, 10,000 people, I just come alive. It's like I'm someone else, It's like I'm imbibed with the Holy Spirit, the Holy Ghost, and I just go for it at any given time, and I seem to forget about the nerves or anything, and I just want to strive to make people enjoy themselves.
But maybe then South Africa and the rest of the world as well, they need to get to know your style of music more than anybody else's. We know Hugh Masekela. He was a giant, an absolute giant. But there's now a future, and I think it's calling your name.
Yes, and we've been inspired by the likes of Hugh Masekela. And through his endeavors and his message, we can also now pick up the baton and also create our own style. We don't need a world of copycats. We need a world of originals and people who have creative approaches to solving the world's problems. And I think by us sharing our stories and sharing where we come from, I think that's where we can actually make a difference.
Tell me something, how healthy is the world of jazz? And I'm also talking about underground jazz, not the stuff that we see commercially. It's the stuff it's that little tavern that you know about on the weekend. How healthy is that?
The world of, if you talk about live music, it's struggling. Live music venues, especially here in Joburg, very, very few and far between. But then if you talk about the talent that actually exists in the South African jazz scene, it's brimming with so much promise and hope. Many of our musicians are actually going abroad to actually study. Many of them are actually going abroad to actually play sold out shows.
Yeah.
But then can't even be accommodated in South Africa. We all have to struggle and fight each other to actually get a gig. And that's why it's very important also for us as musicians and artists to create our own space and our own communities with the resources that we have, and also forge partnerships within our communities. And that's how we can grow the base of our community.
It's interesting, though, because, you say those things about people going overseas, and most of the people I have spoken to sitting in the chair where you are have said the same thing. We have to go overseas. Are you not getting the support that is required back here at home? Or is it if you go overseas, you're an absolute novelty? It's like, well, listen to this sound from Zanzi.
But think about it. We're in a socio-economic crisis at the moment. Many people are without jobs. The transport system is in disarray. There's load shedding. How much does it cost for you to actually attend a jazz show? And when you do, you probably have to take an Uber, which costs how much? You also have to get a meal. You have to drink. So all those costs compound. So maybe you save that money up and afford to go to a jazz festival, as opposed to just watching any other gig in every other weekend. Yeah, so those are the challenges, and no disposable income. And what guarantee do you have if you actually do go to the show that the venue actually does have a generator? And once there's a blackout, you don't know if people are opportunistic enough to actually come there and then rob you. So it's all these things and that people factor in, and and also you as an audience or as an enjoyer, as someone who actually goes out and enjoys the music, you feel that you also don't want to also waste your money on maybe the same place. Maybe the service there was bad, or you found something at fault there. So you also so you become very picky about what you want to watch and where you want to watch it. And many of our audiences these days don't want to watch shows in Johannesburg in the inner city because they always complain about those kinds of things.
Sure, but you don't have to do that. You just go to the Wits Great Hall, you see. And tickets are still available, and we will be there. Mandla Mlangeni, good to chat to you. Thank you.
Always a pleasure.
702.
Thank you.
The upside of failure. I just see the upside.
Thank you. Yeah.
Good to
there's silver lining in every cloud.
702.
The upside of failure.
Sometimes failure is the foundation of greatest success stories.